Yeah, let's hear that little red Cadillac again.
With hunger and a hill.
What Robbie's trying to do to get that sound. Yeah, I know that. Come on here, Ray. Look, we gotta look at these.
Somewhere between Waiting for the Sun and the Soft Parade, something strange happened inside Elektra Studios. The Doors were the biggest, most mysterious rock band in America. They had hits, controversy, and a frontman who looked like he'd stepped out of mythology. But in 1968, they tried to record an album that disappeared before anyone ever heard it. To be fair, I don't recall ever hearing about a missing album, more like an idea for an album that they couldn't get to work, and became what we know now as Waiting for the Sun. There are no official liner notes, no final track list, and no clear record of where those reels went. Some say they were scrapped. Some say they were hidden. Others claim they were never finished. Fragments of an idea, trapped in time, lost to chaos and ego. This is the story of the Lost Doors album that never was. An album buried somewhere between poetry and madness, and the truth about why it vanished. It's early 1968. Strange Days had been a masterpiece of menace. Dark, experimental, and daring. But Morrison's fame had shifted from poet to provocateur. The arrests, the headlines, the intoxication, all of it weighed on the band. Still, inside their studio at 962 La Cienega Boulevard, the Doors weren't thinking about restraint. They were thinking bigger. Producer Paul Rothchild called it the year they wanted to expand. Engineer Bruce Botnick remembered endless reels of tape filled with songs, jam sessions, and half-spoken poetry that nobody knew quite what to do with. The band had one goal: to build something larger than a collection of songs. They wanted to create a musical theater piece, a journey that would fuse Morrison's poetry, Krieger's guitar experiments, and Manzarek's cinematic keyboards into one continuous statement. That project became the working concept called Celebration of the Lizard. It wasn't a single song, it was a suite. More than 17 minutes long, written like a shamanic poem, with sections named Lions in the Street, Wake Up, A Little Game, and
At the street stop, the snake was pale gold, glazed and shrunken.
Morrison had been reading William Blake, Aldous Huxley, and the Book of the Dead. He wanted the album to feel like a ritual, a modern myth that summoned both chaos and rebirth. According to Manzarek, Morrison once said, "I don't want to make a record, I want to make a ceremony." Rothchild, ever the perfectionist, rolled his eyes at the chaos. He loved structure. Jim loved collapse. But he let the tape roll. From January to March 1968, the Doors recorded version after version of Celebration of the Lizard, most of them improvised in real time. It was ambitious, but messy. Take after take, disintegrated into noise, feedback, laughter, or Morrison's drunken howling. Botnick would later say, there were moments of brilliance, and then there were hours of madness. By April, the band realized they were losing control of the project. Elektra was growing impatient. They needed another hit record, and what the Doors were giving them sounded like theater of the absurd. Rothchild reportedly told them, "You're going to scare people to death." Morrison replied, "That's the idea." The group reluctantly abandoned the full Lizard suite and pivoted. They salvaged one piece, Not to Touch the Earth, for release on Waiting for the Sun. The rest of the composition was printed as lyrics inside the album sleeve, a ghost of what the record might have been. But that wasn't the only thing they left behind. Inside Elektra's vaults were dozens of half-finished songs from those same months. Fragments like Albinoni's Adagio in G minor,
Dour face was staring at me from the TV tower.
Who Scared You, Push Push, Whiskey, Mystics and Men, and Celebration Jam. Some surfaced decades later on box sets and bootlegs. Others never did. Fans call that collection the Lost Album. Not because it was stolen, but because it never truly existed. It was an experiment that imploded in real time, buried under ambition, alcohol, and creative friction. But here's where the story twists. According to several accounts, including alleged insider comments from Elektra staffers, there may have been entire reels labeled Lizard Sessions that went missing after 1968. Whether they were erased, misplaced, or hidden to protect reputations, nobody knows. Some say Jack Holtzman, Elektra's founder, ordered cleanup sessions in late '68 that wiped unused reels to save space, a common practice back then. Others think Rothschild himself scrapped the takes because Morrison sounded, in his words, beyond control. No one's ever produced those missing reels. What we have are fragments, outtakes, and mythology. This lost album sits at the intersection of two versions of The Doors. One was a radio band, Hello, I Love You, Love Street, Touch Me. The other was the shadow self, the one chasing vision quests and death rituals through words and wine. In 1968, those two sides collided and the tape snapped. Imagine if The Doors had finished Celebration of the Lizard as a full concept record. Would it have been hailed as their Dark Side of the Moon? Or would it have ended their career? Tell me what you think. Drop a comment right now. Was the world ready for The Doors to go full avant-garde? Or did Morrison's madness destroy a masterpiece before it could live? By summer '68, they were exhausted. Rothschild pushed for something more conventional to save the sessions. He compiled what could be salvaged into Waiting for the Sun, an album both commercially successful and internally disappointing. It hit #1 in the US, their first to do so, but even the band admitted it felt incomplete. Ray Manzarek later said, "We never captured the energy of the lizard. Waiting for the Sun was fine, but it wasn't what we saw in our heads." That missing element, the raw, theatrical edge, would haunt them through the next year. But Morrison wasn't done. Even after Celebration of the Lizard was shelved, he kept returning to its imagery, the serpent, the ritual, the sense of apocalypse. Pieces of it re-emerged in The Soft Parade in L.A. Woman. Lines from the poem echoed in later lyrics like, "Not to touch the earth, not to see the sun," his own myth chasing him across albums. By early 1969, The Doors were split between two worlds. Paul Rothschild wanted a polished studio masterpiece. Jim Morrison wanted a fever dream. They started recording again in November 1968 at Elektra Sound Recorders in Hollywood. Morrison arrived late, or not at all. His voice rough from touring, his patience thin. To fill the gaps, Rothschild encouraged the rest of the band to try new textures, strings, horns, layered overdubs. That decision would birth The Soft Parade.
Cannot petition the Lord with prayer.
To most listeners, it sounded like progress. To die-hard fans, it sounded like surrender. Inside the band, it was open warfare. Morrison hated the brass arrangements. He felt the horns buried his words. In interviews later, he said, "I wanted to get back to basic blues. The orchestra stuff wasn't us." But in 1969, he didn't have the leverage he once did. Rothschild and label head Jack Holtzman were trying to keep the band commercially alive. They couldn't release another sprawling, unmarketable experiment. So the avant-garde lizard concept was quietly abandoned. No more desert rituals, no more extended poetry suites, just songs that could play on the radio. Yet in the background, Bruce Botnick kept copies of many of those outtakes, a practice engineer's habit that would prove priceless decades later. He saved rough mixes, rehearsal tapes, and mono bounces. They gathered dust for 30 years, mislabeled or forgotten. In 1970, during the sessions for Morrison Hotel, the band circled back to earlier fragments. Who Scared You resurfaced in rough form. Whiskey, Mystics, and Men, once part of the Celebration concept, was resurrected, but the chemistry was different now. Jim's voice had dropped into a deeper growl. The reckless fire of '67 was gone, replaced by something older, heavier. The Lost album wasn't just missing tapes, it was missing time. Even then, Morrison still spoke of unfinished pieces. In one 1970 interview, he hinted at a lot of music people will probably never hear. To him, the Lizard suite was alive somewhere in his head. After Jim's death in Paris in July 1971, the mystery only grew. Fans scoured bootlegs for clues, rehearsal takes, acetates, rumors of third reels from the Waiting for the Sun sessions. Most of what circulated were rough early versions that later appeared officially on The Doors, Box Set, 1997, and Perception, 2006. Still, there were always whispers that something, a longer cut of Celebration or alternate verses, had vanished in Elektra's vaults. No hard evidence has surfaced. Engineers involved have allegedly said some reels were wiped during tape recycling in the early 70s. Back then, multi-track tape was expensive. If a session was deemed unreleasable, labels often reused it. That's likely what happened here. No conspiracy, just ordinary studio economics and the slow decay of magnetic tape. The legend of the lost album was reborn in 2003 when surviving members considered remixing, Waiting for the Sun with additional session material. Botnick revisited the archives and discovered hours of takes once thought erased. He restored alternate mixes of Celebration of the Lizard, Who Scared You, and several instrumental jams. They weren't an album, but they proved something important. The myth was rooted in truth. There was a missing era of The Doors, hiding in plain sight on fragile reels. Botnick later described hearing those tapes again. It was chaos, sure, but it was brilliant chaos over time. Fragments of the lost record found new lives. The full poem of Celebration of the Lizard finally appeared in print on Absolutely Live, 1970, performed in near-complete form. Who Scared You surfaced on the Best of the Doors in 1972. Whiskey, Mystics, and Men appeared on anthologies decades later. Piece by piece, the ghost became visible. And yet, no one could truly finish it, because the heart of the missing record wasn't on tape. It was inside Morrison's head. He wanted an album that acted as a psychic mirror, part ceremony, part self-destruction. No producer could mix that. In a way, the lost album is The Doors' perfect symbol, half seen, half imagined. A door half open. When you line up their timeline, it makes sense. The Doors, 1967, Birth. Strange Days, 1967, The Vision. Waiting for the Sun, 1968, The Fragmentation. The Soft Parade, 1969, The Compromise. Morrison Hotel, 1970. The Return to Roots. L.A. Woman, 1971. The Farewell. That missing record sits right in the middle, between genius and implosion. It's the sound of a band trying to evolve, and a poet trying to escape his own image. Robbie Krieger once said, Jim wasn't interested in singles anymore. He wanted to write the next kind of music. That next kind may have been what the Lost album was aiming for. A blend of theater, blues, and the avant-garde. Something like a proto-concept album before Tommy or Dark Side of the Moon. But the Doors didn't have the patience or stability to see it through. Drugs, exhaustion, and record label pressure made sure of that. So, what exactly is the Lost Doors album that never was? It's not a hidden masterpiece locked in a vault. It's the sum of the ideas they couldn't finish. The piece is too strange, too raw, too self-destructive for 1968 radio. It's a mirror of their ambition and their collapse. You can hear traces of it if you listen in order. Not to Touch the Earth bleeds into The Soft Parade. Shaman's Blues echoes its philosophy. L.A. Woman resurrects its tone. It never left them. It just changed shape. If you visit the Elektra archives today, there's no master label for the Lost album. Just boxes of reels marked with session dates, mix numbers, and track names. Push, Push, Whiskey, Adagio. Archivists say they've cataloged everything. Still, engineers note that a handful of leader tapes, segments of spliced film that once separated takes, bear scribbled notes like Celeb Lizard Alt. Whether those are errors, placeholders, or clues, no one can say. Allegedly, at least one reel was lent out in the mid-70s for evaluation and never returned. That may simply be collector folklore. But in the world of rock history, folklore has a way of outliving fact. In the early 2000s, remastering technology finally allowed Botnick and Krieger to resurrect what was left. The result is what fans now call the Lost Sun Sessions, a digital reconstruction from surviving takes. They aren't pristine, they crackle, drift out of time, and end abruptly. But they're real. They're the sound of 1968 bleeding through the speakers, raw and unguarded. Looking back, that failure might have been a blessing. Had the Doors released the full celebration of the Lizard concept in 1968, critics might have laughed it off as pretentious or insane. But because it remained unfinished, it became legend, a missing piece that invites imagination. Jim Morrison once said, "The most important kind of freedom is to be what you really are." In 1968, the Doors tried to capture that freedom on tape, and it escaped them. But in escaping, it made them immortal. There is no hidden album gathering dust in a basement. There is only the echo of what might have been, a band daring to go too far, and a world not ready to follow. Every generation discovers it again, re-listens to those fragments, and hears a different version of the same dream, the one where the Doors finished their ceremony and the world woke up changed.